Hello everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel Ghost Stories by Uncle Dewey. I wish everyone an engaging time listening to ghost stories. Today, we will continue with the ghost stories from all the audience members who have sent their tales for Uncle Dewey to narrate. Those who have ghost stories to share can send them via Gmail as well as through the Zalo phone number currently displayed on this screen. Thank you all very much. Today's session is going to be very interesting. The story that I'm sharing with everyone today is a very intriguing and quite lengthy one about the terrifying spiritual experiences of a girl in Injong. Lou asks, do you think that when your loved ones pass away, they love you so much that they only watch over you, right? But in this person's story, after your grandparents passed away, because they loved you so much, they kept appearing whenever you were out. What unfolds in this story? Let's get started. Today's story is received from a girl in Longshuyan, Injong. She said that since the day Uncle Dewey started narrating the first story, she has been listening and decided to share the spiritual stories surrounding her life. Now here comes the first story about the rose from her grandparents. She said that since she was little, she lived with her grandparents. At that time, her grandparents lived in Longshuyan, while her mother lived with her maternal grandparents in Tinbian. Being the only grandchild of her paternal grandparents, she was very cherished. Back then, while living with her grandparents, she favored her grandfather more, and her grandfather also loved her dearly. Her grandfather was very frugal. Generally, whenever they bought anything for the house, they had to think it over many times. Each time her grandmother went to buy a watermelon, her grandfather wouldn't allow it, even scolding her grandmother. But she was different. Since she was small, whatever she wanted to buy, her grandfather would buy it for her. Her grandfather loved her so much that when he was about to pass away, he made thorough arrangements for her future. Despite having many other grandchildren, she was still favored the most by her grandparents. Her grandparents slept separately, so every night she would insist on sleeping with her grandfather and never with her grandmother. In fact, there was hardly a night she slept with her grandmother. Her grandmother, who also loved her very much, often pleaded with her, saying, "Come on, just sleep with Grandma for a night today." Despite her grandmother's love, she still preferred her grandfather. When her grandmother asked her to come sleep together, she would also decide to sleep with her grandmother. But for some reason, every time she slept with her grandmother, she couldn't fall asleep and kept tossing and turning. Eventually, her grandfather decided to sleep with her instead, not allowing her to sleep with her grandmother anymore, because each time she slept with her grandfather, she slept very soundly without any fuss. Even though she didn't get to stay with her parents, her life was very happy because she was well loved by her grandparents. However, until about the age of 5, my grandfather had liver cancer and passed away. Before he died, he had carefully planned for your future. Before that day, he had already arranged for the money, preparing to give your parents $200 million so that you would have capital for later business ventures. Besides that, you mentioned that at that time, desktop computers were very valuable, and your grandfather had also bought you a complete desktop computer set, including a keyboard, a monitor, and even a table for you to place the computer on. After finishing the computer table, he even got you a bicycle to go to school. Since you were still young back then, you only felt happy and didn't think much. But later, when you grew up, you realized that this was the only gift you received, while none of your grandfather's other grandchildren received anything. It had fallen apart a lot. Seeing that, Mrs. Nam was still very much, well, she scolded very harshly. In general, at that time, you could also see the scene of Mrs. Nam frequently scolding grandmother, but you were still young, so you couldn't do anything more. When school ended, you would take advantage of any day coming home early from school to run over to Mrs. Nam's house to have your mother feed grandmother. But every time Mrs. Nam served food, she would scold you, saying, "You don't know to give it to her. Let her serve herself, because now if you keep feeding her like this, later no one will have time to do it." Since you were still too young then, when Mrs. Nam scolded like that, you just followed along. You didn't know what else to do. But sometimes you still ran over to cook for grandmother. Every time you saw Mrs. Nam serving food for grandmother, you felt very sorry, because every time you served food for grandmother, you did it very quickly, 3 spoonfuls of one dish each time, and then immediately gave it to grandmother. You saw grandmother trying hard to eat it all, but really, she couldn't swallow such large spoonfuls of rice. In general, this scene was just like in the clips of abusive caregivers that people often see. Every time you came to bring food to grandmother, you didn't dare to give her much. You only gave her little by little, so she could eat easily. After giving her 1 spoon, you had to sit and wait for her to finish that spoon before daring to give the next one. So every time you saw yourself bringing food to grandmother, she was very happy. Often your other aunts came to visit grandmother, and you also helped feed grandmother. Whenever those aunts gave money to grandmother, she would stuff the money into your hands. Grandmother just kept giving. She wouldn't take money from you. But your house still had many other aunts and uncles. After seeing Mrs. Nom mistreating grandmother like that, Mrs. Sao expressed her wish to take grandmother home to care for her. Because Mrs. Sao's house was only about 1 kilometer away from there. After many visits to grandmother, Mrs. Sao decided to take grandmother home to care for her. Although Mrs. Sao said that she would take care of grandmother, in reality, that was not the case. There were days when she didn't feed grandmother at all. Usually Mrs. Sao would call you over to her house to feed grandmother. Every morning, before going to school, around 6:30 in the morning, you had to go over to feed grandmother before going back to your studies. Sometimes you even had to bathe grandmother. At this time, you were already in 9th grade, so you had grown up. Every time you went over like that, Mrs. Sao would invite you to eat rice, and you would sit down to eat. Then Mrs. Sao would say, "You take some bananas to eat." You intended to break a banana to eat. Then Mrs. Sao said, "Those bananas are dark brown. You take them to eat first. Let the other uncles eat later." After hearing that, you somewhat realized that Mrs. Sao and her husband were not decent people. It was indeed like that. Everyone who took care of grandmother only did so for a month. Then Mrs. Sao also stopped caring for grandmother. She said, "Grandmother, now go back to Mrs. Nam's house to be taken care of again." You didn't know what else to do, so you had to take grandmother back to Mrs. Nam's house. At this time, the one who fed grandmother every day was you. Who else? When taking grandmother back to Mrs. Nam's house, every day, grandmother fell down a lot because at that time, she was very weak. Since your house was next to Mrs. Nam's house, whenever grandmother fell, she also tried to yell out to call you over to help her up. Saying that, you opened the door to help your grandmother up. You said that Aunt Nam had given you a spare key to open the door whenever your grandmother needed it. But after you were done, you had to lock the door again. You couldn't leave it open. When reading this story up to this point, even though you didn't say it, Dewey also didn't understand one detail, which is why your parents' house has a house, but they didn't take care of your grandmother. You don't know if there's any reason for that. He said that's why Dewey is curious. Every time grandmother falls, you help her up, and you often hear grandmother say this. Grandma just said, "If I pass away in the future, you follow me, okay?" After about 2 years, grandmother also passed away because she was too weak. After grandmother died, everyone just had a normal funeral. But about a month later, you had a strange dream again. You saw your grandmother appear and call you to come. In that dream, you saw yourself playing at Aunt Nam's house with her 2 children. You were standing there playing. Then in the corner of the bathroom, you saw someone standing there. You went up close to the bathroom door and asked, "Hey, who is that?" At that moment, someone opened the bathroom door, and this person said, "It's me, Grandma. I came to take you with me." At that moment, in your subconscious, you knew that your grandmother had died. So why was she standing in front of you like that? You were very scared, so you ran as fast as you could to the gate. But while running, you felt your grandmother behind you holding your wrist. She said, "It's me, don't be scared. Don't you know? You just got hit by a truck and died." Grandmother was still in that dream. When you ran out to Aunt Nam's gate, you were surprised to see Aunt Nam clutching her stomach in pain. She rode her bike home, struggling to breathe. You called out to her, but it was as if she didn't know of your presence. Although you were standing at the gate, it took a long time for you to see Aunt Nam asking to open the door, and she yelled, "Stop calling your mother by her name. Stop acting like Hufai," and hung. Your child just got run over by a truck out there. Did you hear? Where are you running to? At that moment you thought, "Oh, am I dead? Did I just get hit by a truck?" While you were in a panic thinking like that, you got scared, remembering your grandmother was still behind you. She said, "Do you see? I told you it wasn't a lie. You just got hit by a truck and died. So I came back to take you to meet your grandparents." You were just a moment, about 1 or 2 seconds after your grandmother finished saying that. She took your hand. The two of you just turned around, and you found yourself in that old house. Looking around, you saw you and your grandmother standing in the old house where you lived with your grandparents. It was the same house where Aunt Nom currently lives. You saw your grandmother leading you into the house through the back door. You had to go through the front door, but your grandmother held your hand to sneak you in. Grandmother said, "Take it slow. Okay, don't let Grandpa find out." But you don't know why you were slowing down. When you got to the living room, you stood there for a moment until you saw Grandpa come in through the front door. He had just returned from work. You saw Grandpa hang his hat and coat up. As soon as he stepped into the house and saw you, he was very surprised. Grandpa asked, "Where did you come from?" You replied, "Yes, Grandma brought me here because she said I just got hit by a truck and died, so she brought me here to meet you." After you said that, you saw Grandpa was very angry. Grandpa grabbed your hand and led you out of the house. Before taking you out of the front house, you saw Grandpa calling 2 very dark-looking men. You couldn't see their faces clearly. Grandpa said to those 2 men, "This girl is still alive. Return her. Don't let her come down here anymore." Then suddenly you saw those 2 men holding your hand and taking you away. A little while later, you found that you woke up as if you had just gone through a very long dream. As soon as you woke up, your body was trembling and sweaty on the pillow. Since that day, you remembered what Grandma said that you were hit by a truck and died, so you didn't dare to go out on the big street anymore. When going to school, you only took shortcuts. If you rode on the street and saw a truck, you would steer into the sidewalk, so scared you thought you would die. Then you thought you would never have that dream again, but no. 2 weeks later, you saw Grandma in a dream again. At that time, you saw yourself playing in the park, but the scene was very gloomy and ominous. The place had the bridge is a bridge for kids to eat less and play a lot. Do you see that Grandma is standing there, and you should mention it? This bridge is probably about 2 m high, and when you stand below, you can see Grandma holding your hand, pulling, "Come up here." If Grandma goes, you also climb up. You climb up there, and you hear Grandma saying, jump down here, so you won't die." Then Grandma will take you with her. Learning from the experience of the last dream, this time after hearing Grandma say that, you hesitated for a moment, and then you ran away. Running too much. You just kept running while chanting. As a result, when you woke up, you still felt the nightmare in your mouth. At that time, your parents heard about it, but they just thought you had a nightmare. Well, until morning you told your parents about that dream, but they just teased you because they didn't believe in such things. Even though your parents didn't believe, you strongly believed it. Scared to death, worried about whether Grandma would take you away or not. 20 days to a month later, you continued to meet your grandparents again. But this time it was better because the scene in this dream was somewhat brighter. You saw yourself walking into a house, and sitting inside was your grandparents sitting on the stone bench of the earthen house. This house was also quite beautiful. Grandpa and Grandma were sitting on a stone bench. Above there was a golden paper flower. The surroundings were also very poetic. But when you saw Grandpa and Grandma, you didn't dare to go in, because you remembered the 2 previous dreams. You were very scared, so you stood outside, peeking in. At that time, Grandpa waved his hand inviting you in. Grandpa then said, "Come in with Grandpa. This time I won't dare to take you away anymore. Don't be afraid." Since you saw Grandpa yell at Grandma a lot already, you wanted to play with them. But just as you sat down, before you could see anything else, you jolted awake. Therefore, that dream was not complete. In general, after that dream, you were still very scared, but that fear was much less than the previous 2 dreams. After that, you thought back. It must be because Grandma was still alive, she was lonely and sad, and only you were gentle with her. Therefore, Grandma missed you so much that she came back and wanted to take you away like that. After you thought that way, you weren't scared of Grandma at all, and since that last dream, you haven't seen your grandparents again. 2 or 3 years later, at this time you still saw Grandma. But she talked about sour soup asking you to cook for her to eat. At that time, you were going to school in THO, not at home. You called your mother on the phone, asking her to cook sour soup and give it to Grandma. Later on, you no longer saw Grandma anymore. But just like that, every relative in your family who passed away, you saw them come back to talk to you, as if you had a connection with them. Just like over a year ago, when your grandfather passed away, you also saw your grandfather come back and you two talked to each other. On the day your grandfather passed away, one of his children didn't come back in time to see him one last time. So, 3 days after your grandfather passed away, you laid down to dream. In the dream, you saw your grandfather lying down, like the corpse lying on the bed, ready to be prepared for burial. In the dream, you saw your grandfather lying in front, while you were the corpse of your grandfather preparing to be buried. As you turned over, you saw your grandfather's spirit sitting over there beside the bed. You immediately knew that your grandfather had passed away, and now the person in front of you was your grandfather's spirit. At that moment, you felt jealous, and you raised your voice to ask your grandfather. Because at that time, every family member who passed away was someone you met, so you were very jealous. You asked Grandpa, "Grandpa, why are you dead but still talking to me here?" Then Grandpa replied, "I'm waiting for you to come back, because I died and haven't seen him come back yet. He hasn't looked at my face." When you heard Grandpa say that, you saw the corpse in front of you walk over to Grandpa. The two people hugged each other and cried a lot. At that moment, Grandpa said, "I'm satisfied now. Now I can go." After saying that, you looked at Grandpa and saw his spirit slowly walk away and merge into the corpse. After witnessing that scene, you also woke up. You woke up and felt your body was very numb, like just having taken a bath. Since that day, you haven't seen Grandpa appear again. And that's the end of the rather touching story about the Rose of your grandparents, just because they loved their grandchildren so much that they kept coming back to want you to follow them. By the way, I'll let everyone know that you still have 2 more stories, one of which tells about some rather spooky dreams in your dormitory when you were studying in THO. That story, Duwei will tell in the next episode. And now, our story will end here. Thank you all for watching. What do you think of the story? You can comment below for everyone to know. And now, let's wait for the next part. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel Ghost Stories by Duwei. I wish everyone an exciting session of ghost stories. For those of you who have ghost stories to send to Duwei for recounting, you can send them via Gmail as well as to the Zalo phone number displayed on the screen. In today's episode, there are 2 stories that continue from yesterday's episode. Yesterday's story was about the rose of the grandmother of a girl from Injong that Duwei shared. However, before we begin today's story, I would like to clarify a detail from yesterday that we still have questions about. After everyone listened to yesterday's story, while the grandmother was taken to Aunt Nom's house to live, for Aunt Nom to take care of her, people wondered why after the grandmother was abused by Aunt Nom, she wasn't taken back to her parents' house to be cared for. After hearing, you said to Duwei one thing. You mentioned that the reason the grandmother wasn't taken back to your house is that Aunt Nom was given a large house by your grandmother. So Aunt Nom has the obligation to care for the grandmother after the grandfather passed away. Moreover, Aunt Nom and her husband have a very stable economic situation. The couple works in the government, generally well paid, so they have quite a lot of money. Additionally, after your grandmother gave Aunt Nom that large house, she only gave your parents a small lodging. This small lodging has only 8 rooms, so your parents only live in the first room, and they did not build a new house anymore. You said that this lodging is very small because its dimensions are like those of other lodgings, with only 6 meters wide and about 3 to 4 meters long, and it has an attic. So how could they bring the grandmother there? Your parents' room is not even enough, let alone taking care of the grandmother. Furthermore, another point is that your father has been the only grandchild since childhood, so he has been very spoiled. As a result, during his youth until now, every time he goes out, he drinks, and when he comes home, he beats and mistreats his wife and children. Thus, even though he sees Aunt Nom abusing the grandmother, your father wouldn't dare to bring the grandmother home to care for her, fearing that when he comes home drunk, he might scold the grandmother. Another point you want to clarify is that the one wanting to take you away is only the grandmother, while the grandfather just wants to stop the grandmother from having the right to take you away. So, once we understand these two details, when we listen to yesterday's story, please do not criticize this family. Generally speaking, there are always reasons and circumstances behind it all. Now, let's begin today's story. Before we start that story, let's listen to a rather short story from you related to a bracelet bought on Mount Cam. You said you also have a small child. You often tell the child the spiritual stories that you have encountered, so it also knows that you are someone who is easily frightened and that you often encounter ghosts and spirits. Therefore, during one visit to Mount Cam, that child bought you a bracelet, a jade bead bracelet for you to wear for peace so that you wouldn't see things or spirits anymore. After receiving the jade bead bracelet from the child, you were very pleased because this bracelet is quite beautiful. You thought that wearing this bracelet would prevent you from being pressed by ghosts or having terrifying nightmares. But it didn't turn out that way. Since the first night you wore this jade bead bracelet, you kept having a recurring dream. In the dream, you saw a woman dressed in white, her long hair covering her face completely. In the dream, you see this woman continuously chasing you, holding a paper knife after you. You said that in the dream, once you saw her chasing you, you just ran away while running. She held the knife and said, "You must die. You must die for me." You just ran while reciting Buddha's name like that. After a while, you woke up. Once awake, you felt your whole body was cold, but you were sweating like you just took a shower. You were also very scared and lay reciting the Buddha's name, too afraid to go back to sleep. After a while, you fell asleep again, and it was already near dawn. After that, for the next 3 days, you continued to wear this jade bead bracelet to sleep, but you noticed that it seemed like every day you wore this bracelet, you would have that dream for 3 consecutive days. Every day you saw that woman in white appear and chase you with a knife. At that moment, you didn't know whether these dreams originated from the jade bead bracelet or not. You were unsure. After 3 to 4 days, you stopped wearing the jade bead bracelet and realized something different. Whenever you didn't wear it, you slept normally and didn't see anything at all. In the following days, you thought back and realized, oh, this bracelet my friend bought in the temple. It has nothing to do with anything. You started wearing it again, and that night, you saw the same thing as before with a woman in the white attire, long hair covering her face, holding the knife, chasing you incessantly. The next day, you decided to discard that bracelet altogether, not wearing it again, and naturally after not wearing that jade bead bracelet anymore. You also stopped seeing the woman in white in your dreams. That concludes your rather short story. You again were taken aback. Not because you were lying in bed, but because you saw yourself standing at the foot of your bed, and in front of you was your body lying on the bed. This means it was like your soul had left your body. Your soul was standing while your body was lying on the bed. You said at this moment you could see yourself sleeping on the bed very clearly, not like dreaming anymore. You could still see the others in the room going about their normal activities. It wasn't like a dream. Seeing yourself lying on the bed, you turned and saw Nan, who was the one sharing a room with your friend. You saw him walking out of the bathroom, then you saw him go to the mirror to shave. When he noticed you, you felt very happy and called out, Nan, do you see me standing here?" Yes, but he didn't see you at all. He continued what he was doing without hearing you at all. You started to look around the room, and you saw your friends still lying on the bed, fiddling with their phones like crazy, but no one heard you say anything. You understood that you had probably left your body, so you began to recite the Buddha's name. While you recited, you also said, "Let the soul enter the body. Let the soul return to the body." This meant you wanted your soul to return to your body. You kept repeating those phrases continuously, and after a while, you were able to return to your body, and you fully woke up. Earlier, you were very clear-headed, but about 5 minutes later, you regained your senses. After you were completely awake, the first thing you did was to ask Nan if he had really come out of the bathroom to shave. When you asked him like that, he replied, "You've been sleeping. How did you know I came out from the bathroom and was shaving?" You also asked the others around who were sitting there fiddling with their phones, and they were all surprised, because just a while ago, I saw you sleeping. How did you know all that happened? Ever since that dream, you went around asking others there, and you learned that in the past, in room 206 of your friend's place, there had been a man and a woman who hung themselves to death. Hearing them say that, you felt very uneasy. You were sure that those two had manifested and entered your dream. Therefore, since then you have not dared to go up to your friend's room anymore to play. After that, whenever you gathered together, they only came down to your room, not going up to that room anymore. About 3 or 4 months later, at this time you accidentally met a guy. He had been in the dorm for quite a while, so you knew he knew quite a bit about ghost stories here. You casually invited him outside to the yard, asking him to tell you ghost stories for fun. Although you were very scared of ghosts, you also liked listening to ghost stories. It has been quite a long time since then, so you know this guy knows quite a bit about ghost stories around here. You just happened to invite him outside to the yard, asking him to tell you ghost stories. Even though you are very scared of ghosts, you still love listening to ghost stories. By chance, he tells you that in room 206, which is my friend's room, there used to be a male and a female in this room, and no one knows the reason why these two people hung themselves to death here. As for this female, besides attending school, she also used to take the bus to sell bus tickets to earn some extra income. He also mentioned that in the past, anyone who was timid in room 206 would often be scared by these two. At that moment, you felt frightened, recalling the creepy smiles of the ticket-selling girls in your dreams. You stayed here for a while, without any issues, until now you were scared in your own room. Since it was summer vacation and you were a freshman, you went back to your hometown because freshmen didn't have any part-time jobs, so you returned home. However, your things could still be left in the dormitory. Whenever vacation ends, you just need to come back to study. But when the second summer vacation came, you had to work part-time, so you didn't return home and had to stay in the dormitory. At that time, everyone in the dorm had gone back home, leaving just you alone in this room. At this point, you already had a boyfriend, and you two have been together until now. Since at that time, those other people had all gone back home, you had to sleep in a room by yourself. The first few days alone here, nothing happened at all, and then a few days later things were normal. Every evening you would call and talk to your boyfriend. That night around 12, you started to hang up the phone and lay down to sleep. But that night, right after you placed the phone down, you quickly fell asleep. This dorm room had 8 people living in it and 4 bunk beds. Your sleeping bed was the bottom bunk near the entrance, so since you were on the lower bunk, you covered the area with a net, planning to wrap your bed up completely. At that time, you had already fallen asleep when you suddenly entered a dream. In this dream, you were happily talking on the phone with your boyfriend, giggling a lot. At that moment, you heard a voice from the bed above you. Someone from up there said, "Shut up. What are you doing talking and joking every night like this? Don't you have a girlfriend?" You didn't understand why. Right after you heard that voice, your body went stiff, and you couldn't comprehend the reason why. At that moment, in your wallet, you saw something like a person lying across on the upper bed, their face sticking out, like the face of this person peeping out, and their head leaned down toward your bed to show you their face. Just imagine. It's like the face of this person is sticking out and lowering their head down under your bed to show you their face. You can clearly see that this face belongs to a girl, but she looks very pale. One of her hands reaches out from above the netting, reaching in. The other hand of hers reaches from below the legs, which is underneath your bed too. It reaches up from there to grab you. You say, the distance from the top of the upper bunk to the end of your netting is about 1 to 2 meters, which means this person's hand must stretch really long, down to beneath. While your whole body is stiff and rigid, this person brings their pale face along with their 2 hands and want to grab you. Earlier you were quite scared, so you had to chant the Buddha's name, as there was no other way. After chanting for a while, you noticed your body slowly becoming lighter. But at that time, her 2 hands were still reaching in. At this moment, you sat up, ran straight out, flung the door, and ran right outside to the yard. As you were running, you looked back. The girl in the pale dress was still chasing after you. You got to the yard, called your friend while looking into the dormitory. You saw that inside there was a common room, and this room still had people. They were sitting there typing on the computer to study. You called out, but they couldn't hear you. They didn't pay attention to you at all. Standing there in the middle of the yard, you knew you had encountered a ghost. Now all you could do was chant the Buddha's name, as you couldn't do anything else. After chanting a few phrases, you began to wake up, sat up, with Na still beside you, but your mouth was still very cold. The ghost was in chaos. But earlier in the room, there was only you alone, no one else. It turned out that all this time, it was just a nightmare. You said, "Oh my God." Even though I'd woken up from that dream, I was still so scared that my whole body turned pale, completely cold. Looking at the clock, it was only 3 a.m., and there was only you in the room, asleep. So you were really scared, which is why you took out your phone to call your boyfriend to tell him. But for some reason, just as you were taking the phone out, when you tried to call your boyfriend, it showed that you had run out of credit. Even though you had just topped up your phone earlier that morning, now it showed there was no balance. You turned on your phone's 4G to use it, but at that moment, you couldn't turn on the network. So you thought your 4G subscription had expired. As a result, you kept fiddling around trying to register, but were unsuccessful until you finally found a way to borrow some credit on your phone. Then you had balance again, but at this moment you couldn't call. You were allowed to have boyfriends, as you say every day, whether it is day or night, no matter when you call your boyfriend. He always answers the phone, but I don't understand why today he set his phone as silent and couldn't answer your call. At this moment, you feel like everything is too coincidental. Just saw that nightmare, and now something is wrong with the phone, unable to call your boyfriend. If so, you're very scared, can't do anything, but now it's too late at night. You decided to play some meditation music to lie down, but you can't sleep at all, tossing and turning until 5 a.m. when you see people waking up. You finally dare to make breakfast, sit up, and go to work right away without being able to sleep anymore. Until the next morning, when your boyfriend turns on his phone, he sees that you suddenly called him a lot last night. So he called back to ask how it was yesterday. He said that he didn't set his phone to silent at all last night, so that you could call whenever you wanted, but he doesn't understand why. After the two of you called and talked, his phone suddenly switched to silent mode on its own, and he didn't do anything to it all. So since then, every night while you sleep, you play meditation music to listen to, but you can't seem to sleep soundly in front of it, like being constantly disturbed. Scared about everything, you can't sleep straight through. After summer ended, you also decided to move out of the dormitory, not living in that dorm anymore. After moving to this rental place, it is a house beside a riverside. Because in THO, there are many houses right next to the river, everyone. If you say, then perhaps this place is located in Alley 51, not sure if it's correct. When you first moved in, your parents also came to that room to make offerings for you. You stayed there for about a year. Probably because you didn't make any offerings at this time, you started to have dreams again. And those dreams were not like normal people's dreams, always terrifying. That time, in your dream, you saw yourself standing by a riverbank. Standing so close to the riverbank that you only needed to take one more small step to fall into the river immediately. But at this moment, you felt your neck was very heavy, as if someone was hanging on your neck. After a while of looking around your neck, you saw a man sitting on your neck. At that moment, you heard him say, "Do you believe it's a high show and you'll die if you fall into the river?" At that time, you knew it was night, and you realized you encountered something again, because you had always encountered the same thing before. Each time it happened, you just had to chant the Buddha. After finishing, I wake up as I did before. Then I also bought some fruit to offer, and I didn't see it anymore. Although since that dream, I no longer have bizarre dreams, I still don't understand why my necks on both sides are still very sore. It hurts in a way that no medicine seems to relieve. Because of that, your mother is also very worried, not knowing if something is wrong with her child. Since you study far from home and regularly experience strange things, your mother also took you to a teacher to seek charms for peace, hoping you wouldn't see such things anymore. Fortunately, you found the right teacher, and since then, you haven't had those terrifying dreams like before. And that brings us to the end of the thrilling stories about the dreams of a girl from Ajong. Next, Duwei will tell everyone a story, but the person in this story wants to ask everyone a question. Could it be that you have a spiritual connection, or is it just your vivid imagination? After hearing this story, everyone can comment below and provide an answer. Until now, Duy thought stories about spiritual connections were all similar, but in reality, there are also many different stories. Just like today's story, this one was sent by someone who shared their tale in episode 89 of the Night Makeup series. Everyone, for those girls who often post status updates on Facebook, you must listen to this story. This is a story of a spiritual connection related to a Facebook account. This person shared that 6 years ago, they had been a team leader in an electronics company. Back then, Facebook wasn't like it is now. People rarely posted pictures. Most of the time, they would just post their status updates. This person did the same and frequently updated their statuses. During that time, they noticed that whenever they posted, a particular Facebook account would regularly interact very positively with them. It was like every post they made, this person would greatly like it. When they noticed this person interacting so much, they clicked on their profile to check. Upon viewing, they saw that this person didn't use their real name, only a nickname. When they clicked on the profile picture, this person, there are no pictures of the face at all, and this person's profile picture is just a shot of part of their back, wearing a rather thin white shirt, and on their back, there's also something else on top of it. At that time, to be honest, I was very curious about the identity of this person. However, I must say that this person is very interesting. They seem to have guessed every emotion of mine, both the joys and sorrows of my life, as well as work. Because every time I am happy or sad, this person would text me to check on me. Generally speaking, I and this person would also chat back and forth, but this person never revealed their true face to me. Whenever I asked, "Who are you?" this person would only reply that they worked in the same company as me, on the same production line. But the thing is, I worked a different shift from this person. Thus, at that time, we rarely texted each other. Whenever something happened, this person would text me to comfort me. Then, a few days later, there was tension between China and Vietnam regarding the dispute over the Paracel and Spratly Islands. So in those days, the people were very agitated. They burst into my company to cause chaos. So the company decided to let employees take the day off and not go to work. It was also due to the urge to play. After the company gave us a day off, I didn't want to go home. I, along with others in the company, said, "Let's go have fun together," but we didn't know where to go. While we were saying to each other, "Where should we go now?" that mysterious person started texting me, wanting to invite me out. But honestly, I also wanted to go with that person to see what they were like, so I texted them saying, "Okay, let's go to coffee, but on the condition that we go with all my friends who are here." Because I was quite afraid of strangers, finally, this person and I arranged to go out for coffee with my friends. When we arrived at the coffee shop, I saw that this guy was quite handsome, tall, and very polite. After that meeting, I learned that this guy's real name is Hung, and the two of us began to talk more, became closer, and went out together more often. Since we like hanging out and talking, I gradually developed feelings for this guy, Hung. Later on, I found out that my best friend also liked Hung. However, at this time, I already had a boyfriend, so I felt that way, and I planned to limit my contact with Hung to give my best friend the opportunity. My best friend had more opportunities to interact with Hung, and you also wanted to pair those two together. In general, there was a lot of time when your whole group went out together with Hung. He would occasionally text to check on you. I'm usually like that too, but every time he texts, he's always ambiguous. You can tell he's flirting with you. He's really into you and not into your best friend. However, at that time, you also had a boyfriend, so you intentionally ignored his flirting comments, not paying attention. Then finally, after some time, you and your boyfriend decided to get married. On the day you went to send wedding invitations to everyone was surprised as to why you kept mentioning another groom's name, not Hung. The reason people said that was because they saw you were too close to Hung. They thought you two were preparing to marry each other. But you only replied, "Oh my God, Hung and I are just friends." However, a month after your wedding, Hung quit his job, and you noticed he had unfriended you on Facebook. At that time, you were quite upset by Hung's behavior. So, after you heard he got sick, you didn't go to ask after him until about 2 weeks later. On that day, you were also at work, but because of some issues, you went out to eat late. At that time, there were only a few people in the cafeteria. You were sitting eating when a sister came over to tell you a story, quietly. She said, You didn't know what happened? Hung has died. Why didn't you go to his funeral? Everyone is asking where you disappeared to. Oh my God, at that moment you were stunned. You couldn't believe it was real. You asked, which Hung are you talking about? She replied, the one who liked you. So right after hearing that, you left work, hopped on your bike, and rode straight to Hung's house to see if it was true. But no, it was completely true. When you got back to his house, you saw an altar and his memorial photos inside. As you entered, you looked and saw how his picture seemed to be looking and facing in a certain direction, as if it were a gift from fate. At that moment, you only felt a deep sense of guilt. Why did you know he was sick, but didn't go visit him? So that day, you went to light incense, but you didn't dare look at that picture. Since the last time you met Hung, you said from then on, especially whenever your work faced trouble or was postponed, you felt very pressured and very sad. So on such nights, often, you see a man appearing to comfort you. At first, you didn't pay attention, you just thought you were dreaming. But over time, you keep seeing this man in your dreams, just that one man. Looking at this person's back, you recognize a spider web tattoo, just like the one on Hung's old avatar. He also wears a light white shirt and has a spider web tattoo on his back. But the special thing is that every time, this man only turns his back to you, not letting you see his face. You say it's really intense. Until now, it has been several years, but every time you are under pressure in life, you often see this man turning his back to you, not letting you see his face. You still go out a lot, absolutely never see his face. But strangely, in those dreams, you feel better. Your work is more uplifting, helping to untangle the troubles and knots in your life. Your feelings are intense and indescribable. In general, life is still normal, and you still throw yourself into work. However, sometimes you miss Hung very much. You miss him to the point of crying. You miss him a lot, always missing him. Every time you remember him, that night you see the man appearing again, turning his back, leading you out, but this person doesn't let you see his face, and this person doesn't even talk to you at all. Every time he takes you out, he remains silent, not saying anything at all. After that incident, you told two close friends. One person with a modern perspective said, "It must be because you are thinking too vividly. It's just your imagination. There can't be such coincidences." The other one said, "Maybe you are blessed by Hung, but it can't last too long like this. You need to find a teacher to have him reincarnate. He can't follow you forever." You added that your current life is still normal, not affected at all, and your feelings with your current husband are also very happy like any other couple. However, one thing is that sometimes you miss Hung, and you cry without knowing why. Just the last time, when you thought of him, that night you saw him again, he took you out. After waking up, your mood was very good. You were very happy, but every time you saw him taking you out, the next morning, your mood was not as happy as the day before. Last night again, it's because you often listen to Duwei tell stories about spiritual connections, but none of those stories are like yours. So, you asked everyone if it was your imagination running wild, or if you were actually experiencing a spiritual connection. Can everyone help you answer that? And now, our story here has come to an end. What do you think of the story? You can leave a comment below for everyone to know. And now, we will finish the story here and wait for the next ones. There are many more to come. Bye-bye, everyone.